Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, FP&A Innovation for Growth. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console, next to the chat feature. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would love to introduce our moderator, Dipti Arora, Vice President of Finance at Circle CI. We are excited to have Dipti and our panelists with us for a panel titled FP&A Talent, Cultivating a Culture of Learning. Welcome, Dipti, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Welcome, everybody, to our session today on FP&A Talent and Cultivating a Culture of Learning. As Brittany mentioned, I'm Dipti Arora. I'm a finance executive in tech, and in my current role, I'm VP of Finance of a late-stage startup in the DevOps space called Circle CI. As many of you might have done in the finance space, I started my career in public accounting and then through the finance ranks through FP&A and strategy. Now to my current role, I'm based out of the Bay Area in San Jose. I'd love for the rest of the panel to introduce themselves as well. We have an amazing panel lined up. I'll hand over to you, Andrew. Maybe you can go first with the introduction.
Sure. I'm Andrew Freeman. I'm Director of FP&A at Weber. We are not the barbecue company, but we are the heavy civil construction company based here in Houston, Texas. But we do projects in Florida, Georgia, Texas, and several other East Coast. We're owned by a larger Spanish heavy civil construction company out of Spain. I'm not an accountant by trade. I became an FP&A through after MBA school or business school. So I've been doing it most of my career has been in FP&A, starting as a business analyst out with United Airlines and then moving around the country with various companies and different roles. So,
thank you for that, Andrew. Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Pulaski. I run the Northeast Region Finance for Arthur Gallagher, which is an insurance broker. I started my career a long time ago at KPMG, did the same thing, 5 years or so in public accounting. And I came to Gallagher in 2006. So I've been here pushing 19 years now. And we've grown a lot through acquisition, and our industry is consolidating. So we grow both. It's kind of a balance between organic growth and M&A growth. And so the financial planning and analysis comes really critical when you're onboarding mergers and figuring out, like, look, how do we make 1 + 1 = 3? And so it's really kind of an iterative process, like how we work with the business and make sure, hey, we're sitting here and we're growing revenues faster than expenses and basically paying for everything we're doing. So happy to be here today and looking forward to this session.
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking forward to the session as well. I know we'll all have a unique point of view on the questions we have lined up because we come from very different backgrounds and different industries. So that's awesome. So I'll jump right into the questions. And the first discussion question that I'd like to throw out to both of you is that from your experience, what are the most effective strategies for identifying the talent needs of an FP&A team? And if you have any real world examples, those are great to share. So please share those. Andrew, do you want to take the lead with that question?
Sure. I think FP&A to me there's two sides. There's technical and soft skills. And I know a lot of us have the technical skills, the financial modeling, the analysis, Excel, especially if you're coming out of accounting and that kind of stuff. It's the soft skills that you need. And that's mainly because you're communicating with, department heads, executives, your problem solving with both finance and accounting teams, also non-finance teams. So, and I think a real world example is truly right now where we're in the process of our forecast and budget for the rest of this year and next year. And we're in meetings and we need to be able to communicate to the different department heads and our CEO and our CFO about what we're seeing in the forecast. So I think that's one area where we've done both in my current team is gone through communication and presentation courses to help them with sort of that soft side of skills, which is necessary. They've also been through advanced Excel and other trainings, but that's kind of where we do. And also I think another key skill set that's possibly needed is being flexible. I mean, FP&A we're I always joke we're the last in the chain. So accounting closes, but if someone's late, the deadline for a budget or a forecast or a report is still there. So we're the last. So you just need to be flexible and then also as the business changes, and that happens to us all the time. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Matt, we have you back. Do you have anything you'd like to add to?
Well, I kind of missed it, but I think if the questions for the strategies for identifying talent, I think we all know the kind of permission to play is hardcore Excel skills. What we really look for is curiosity and able to partner with business, really empathy, listening, asking questions, and being able to apply that analytically to the numbers. If you can combine those things, then you got a great team member.
Yeah, I totally agree with what both of you said. I mean, the soft skills are so critical for FP&A team members, and sometimes when they're early in their career, those are the biggest development areas for them. I do also feel the hard skills are changing as well, especially for folks that are entering the FP&A workforce. And I know we'll get to talk about this a little bit more when I segue into the next question. But I think it's a completely different, almost like pivoting in what's required in terms of the hard skills with the introduction of AI. The FP&A folks need to know how to leverage some of these things to do their job better than actually know how to do the data massaging themselves. I think also over the last few years, their technical needs to query data has changed. So they've had to develop, the people who are entering into the workforce have to have that skill set, which maybe they didn't have to have before. So I do feel like the technical skill set required by FP&A teams has also been evolving over the last few years with the technologies changing. So yeah, with that, I'd like to segue into the next question. How can finance leaders determine the best upskilling and reskilling initiatives that can enable internal growth? Matt, do you want to take the lead with that one?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at first understanding the business's initiatives and really what's our strategy to grow. And I think there you look at does the strategy, does it get you critical mass? Does it get you kind of revenue growth in excess of comp growth so things pay for themselves? And it's really a successful strategy. I think that's where some of our analysts, if you're good at financial modeling, then it's you have to do the scenario analysis. And it's look, it used to be in the past, we'd be looking backwards a lot. Now we're trying to look forward as much as we can. And no one really knows the future. So it's when we're looking forward, having good, as you're saying, the hard skills, having good statistics skills, putting confidence intervals kind of around, here's my scenarios, here's the likelihoods. And then even more with the soft skills, anybody can kind of model and put numbers together. But if it's the good scenario, what action do we take? If it's medium, which actions do we take? If it's the low end, how do we switch actions based on how we kind of forecasted what to come each scenario, and then looking at saying, look, how do we make this iterative and really make it a learning experience? So it's almost like you're making a bet. If I'm looking and I'm I think my growth is going to be 7%. And then if it comes in at 5, it's okay, I thought it was 7. What changed that we got it wrong? Understanding it, making it more interactive. And I think those are the things. So it's a combination of skills and curiosity, because it's more trial and error when you're looking forward, because nobody knows the future. If you look at weather forecasters, right? It's they get it right 7 times out of 10, but nobody gets it 100%. And I think sometimes there's an expectation that we can actually predict the future. And it's more, no, this is a model. And how do you use this model to make better business decisions?
Yeah. Andrew, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I'm kind of back to your original point in the last question about the AI and advancements. I mean, for us, it seems like the reporting cycle is getting shorter and shorter for us. So having my team we're utilizing a robot or a bot to help us with some stuff so that we can get, instead of us spending time downloading data out of the GL system or the system, we're using that bot to do it. And so kind of making sure that we can be a little bit faster with our analysis, with our reporting to help them to see the outcomes. Because that is a problem. I've always felt in the past, and FP&A is 80% putting together a report, 20% analysis, and I'm trying with the technology that's out there to move it so that we're more 20% putting together, 80% doing the analysis, so that we can see it, so that we're not making decisions at the end of the month. We're making decisions early on so that we can redirect the business.
So Andrew, do you find any problems with your team? Like, this is where I see it's like sometimes getting them to let go of things they've done because it can be automated, which enables us to do more of the value add activity as opposed to the data crunch, which is important. But if we can automate that, so sometimes I see a struggle with people letting that go and saying, no, let the machine do it. But then once you get the answer, you need to make more recommendations. What does this mean to the business, and how do we integrate it?
My team has not pushed back on the bot. I mean, the bot we're using for is like what we call our pre-close, which is our cycle before accounting closes it, and that we're running over and over. And the task before was downloading out of SAP flat files. This is doing it, and so it makes it so that we can it frees up that analyst's individual time to do something else or to work with a division to make sure, hey, are these numbers what you're seeing? And so just it gives that a little bit. So there wasn't a lot of pushback. I think the pushback is when our company makes changes in structure, is how is the bot going to be able to handle that? Or is the bot going to work? But we always have our backup, which is the old way. But so far we've been using the bot for I think about 4 months or 6 months or so. It's been working relatively well. So there hasn't been a lot of pushback on that. Now, if I introduce an AI to do something, and maybe there'd be a little pushback.
Yeah, I do think sometimes there's pushback because maybe people don't understand how it's working, and there's less trust in what's gonna be the outcome of it. We just having the team involved in the process and setting up like the logic of the things can help, because that can help to build the trust. I've seen, but sometimes they can also be pushback, Matt, I've seen, because maybe the team doesn't have the skill set. Like they spend so much of their time, like the person doing this role, it's just so much of their time just getting the numbers together that they don't know how they're going to repurpose their efforts. So I think that's where the upskilling comes into play, which is, have them get upskilled with like being able to explain the numbers, being able to like understand the business, to be able to be articulate about it, so that they know that it's actually a good use of their time to like not have to do that stuff that they're manually doing, and it's a good opportunity for them to learn and a growth opportunity for their role, right? So I think sometimes there could be some nervousness around that. Okay, am I going to lose my role because I'm not doing this thing that I was doing before? I've kind of seen both of those things happen.
No, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I find myself selling kind of the team I work with, well, here's why we need to evolve, here's why we need to change, and here's why we need to provide more insight. And then it is adopting tools, and sometimes it is getting out of your comfort zone of like, look, I know everything there is to know about the past. It's impossible to know everything there is about the future. So being able to put things more into frame and context, like here's what we're looking at, and this goes into the Simon Sinek, like understanding why. It's like, well, my recommendation is this because of this, and then putting yourself out there a little bit with your predictions so they can be challenged, and you can basically, it's more interpreting data and how to use it than it is just compiling it.
Yeah, I've seen like with my team, I've pushed a lot of the automation so that because we have a much leaner team, I've been pushing a lot of automation so the team can focus their efforts on bringing the insights and the strategic things. And we actually moved from one FP&A tool to a completely different one last year. So it was a pretty major overall in the team, and there was a lot of reskilling for the teams, like how to use the tool. But now that we've been fully onboarded with the tool, it's actually freed up a lot of the time. We moved all of our operating expense and budgeting. Budget management was pretty manual before we moved to the tool, and after the implementation of this tool, it's been uh, pretty much like hands off. They're just having to like go and update things and check a few numbers, and that's been pretty game changing in terms of where they're spending their time.
So do you have mostly a newer team, or have you had to have people kind of evolve in their roles as things have evolved?
Yeah, I've had to have people evolve in the role as things have evolved. So they basically had to learn how to use the new tools. They were involved in the implementation. We did a lot of training, and I had one person in my team that was almost like the sponsor for that project and was very deeply involved in some of the implementation as well. Being a finance person, he was like more technical and kind of learned the technical side and was the lead on the project and helped to also train the other people on the team, which I think was really good. I think it was good for them to see that was coming from like another finance person and not like an IT person or somebody that's or an engineer that's like completely got a different skill set.
We're similar. We've evolved too. I mean, that's just kind of, my team has been with me for a while, so it's just they've evolved their skill set to match what we need. So, and just driving a little bit more efficiency. That's what to me, what's what the tools give us is a little bit more efficiency in the process.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, as we're talking about evolution, this is a good segue into the next question, which is, how do you think that finance leaders can balance the need for having more specialized skills with a broader skill set that's also required? How do you balance both of them? Matt, do you have thoughts on?
Yeah, and I think like I'm fortunate enough to have like within my Northeast team, we have about 6 people, and then throughout the country there's probably like 30 or so. But what we try to do is like, look, everybody should be a generalist, which means you basically understand the business and you're able to partner with people. But then we've developed kind of SMEs within, like where one person will take the lead on M&A, one person will take the lead on kind of more the HR stuff, like which is compensation, how do we pay people. Another person will be looking more on the OpEx stuff, like how do we handle leases. So we're able to kind of get, everybody's got a certain core function, and then we have people that specialize. So it's like, look, when there's a certain project that comes up, one person can take the lead, but they don't have to lead everything, so we can balance. And I feel like that's really good. And then it's also kind of, we have a hybrid structure of reporting where you do report in through finance, but then you also have a dotted line into the business. So if you don't keep both your masters, if you keep both your masters happy, you're good. If you keep one of them happy and not the other, that's not so good. So it's like, you kind of have to be a little bit of a politician in FP&A, where it's like, look, if the business doesn't accept your recommendations, you're not really that useful. But if you don't have sound recommendations and you're not going the same way as like the finance team wants you to go, like there's an interlap to there. So it's like, you need people that kind of, I don't know, I always say like, I always enjoy chaos. And I think there's a lot of chaos in finance, especially as you're looking forward, because you don't really know the future. And then what happens? Like, look, if we have good results, nobody ever asks you a question. When you have bad results, they expect you to do it 13 times over and over again. Somehow it's like the 13th time you do it, right? You're going to come to a different answer, which doesn't. So it's like, look, how do we explain and how do we anticipate a lot? I think is really like, look, if you have less than stellar results, you're going to get a question. So having a crisp response, explaining it, getting people comfortable with the numbers they're seeing, and that you're taking appropriate actions and responding, like that's where, like, look, even if we do kind of underperform our own targets, if we have good explanations and we maintain confidence, that's the key. So I think going back to the question though, it's like getting your FP&A team, and I know some teams are small, only 1 or 2 people, but if you get a bigger team where we have 5 people, it's how do you divide and conquer? And you don't have to be the master of everything, but you do have to be able to leverage your teammates and work in kind of a complex structure where you probably have multiple masters.
Yeah, really good points.
Yeah.
Andrew.
We're similar. I mean, I have people that have. My team's small. It's 2 people. So they have 2 core. Both have a core set of skills. But what I also liked with them is a little bit of not cross training, but kind of them working together to foster some collaboration, especially if one's figured out a way. A lot of our data sets are similar. So if one's figured out a way to pull something easier this way, then have the other one work on that if it's with the cash flow or the P&L. So kind of encouraging them to sort of work together in a way, even though they both have their sort of their silos, or not silos, but their set tasks. But and I also I have some senior and I have some junior analysts, and so getting them to kind of the more senior analysts to help the junior analysts kind of bring them up to speed. But there's been where the junior one has helped out the senior one with certain different methods and stuff. So I try to keep them so that they're working together. So.
Yeah, I do think sometimes it's a function of the size of the team and the company size, whether they're generalists or specialists, right? Like when you have a small team, like what you were saying, Andrew, like you kind of have to have generalists because you need them supporting everything that's happening in the business. I did do that when my team was much smaller. Now I was able to grow it to a team of 5. So I've now gotten to the point where they all understand the business, but they have their areas that they support, like one from supporting all of the sales and marketing, both the top line and the OpEx. The other one supporting, R&D and the COG side. Like I've had to make them a bit more specialist so that even the business knows that they have a dedicated person that they can go to, because sometimes otherwise it gets confusing. They're trying to like find who the person is that they need to reach out to the team when you have a bigger team. So I think as the team size grows and the company size grows, you do need to get to the point where you need to have them specialize or supporting different things, both for their benefit and also for the benefit of the business partners that they're supporting. That's kind of what I found. I mean, also it'll be great for us to share like practical approaches that we're taking for the teams, for FP&A teams to continuously integrate learning into their daily routines. And I'd love to hear how you both are doing that, and then also what role you're playing or the larger management is playing in enabling this. Andrew, would you like to start?
Sure. Daily routine. I mean, the learning is probably when we have downtime, which ebbs and flows with FP&A. But I mean, I think that goes back to what I said earlier: culture of sharing and collaboration within the team and outside the teams. I mean, because we do have, we have finance and engineers outside that can help with stuff. Also, I'm big on encouraging experimentation and innovation. So, I'm not dating myself. I believe in H lookup and V lookup, and I know there's X lookup. So kind of allowing them to spend time doing something different. So giving them that space. When there is downtime between a forecast cycle or before reporting or the close process starts back up first, give them the ability to sit there and experiment, try something new. Don't, and then also allow them their possibility of failures and learning. Also, we at Weber, we use LinkedIn Learning. So a lot of my team will actually go to LinkedIn Learning and take some of the courses there. So giving them that time. So I think from a management role, it's just to give them, we're running fast through forecast budgets, through reporting, through analysis. But when there is a downtime, giving them that space, giving them ability to sort of spend time to learn something or try something new, because that's what's happened in the last year. We've been able to enhance what we've done and gotten a little bit faster at getting out reporting, and by letting them sort of work together, also work on independently and try something new in the files. Because a lot of the files were originally set up by me, and I've told both of my analysts, I'm sure there's more efficient ways of doing this and so they've both figured out ways to make things faster and easier. So.
Yeah, I love that you said using their downtime to like learn and experiment and whatnot. That's a great way to look at it when they're not in the busy forecast or budgeting.
Right.
Yeah. Not more thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. My most successful finance people are talking to multiple people with like the more people you're talking to, the more you learn. So for example, like look, like I don't know how many heard of the book Traction, and there's the EOS model there, but I think we need to use field finance as much as the integrator role in there where we have the numbers and then we can integrate to be like, okay, you think you're doing this, but is it working? Is it not? And really educating. I mean, it's not just the business that you're working with, but it's, the HR people that may be kind of looking at how do we use comp differently and working with them, working with your service people. If you're working with all the different layers, then you're getting perspectives and you can really provide more insight into the numbers because you can represent multiple people's perspectives and say like, oh, this is what this means. But I'm like, look, we have a lens that nobody else has because usually if you're working, you don't have access to all this data and you can't see it top down. And a lot of the individual employees don't know the trends. We can know the trends and understand, be like, here's what we're seeing. Does this make sense with the stuff you're doing? So the more people you're talking to, the more effective you are in your role. And if you're spending, all your time buried in the Excel spreadsheet, then it's like, well, then we're not using the data as much. So I think just looking like the more you're talking to people, that kind of gets your skills. And then like the other stuff, it's like, look, we can kind of learn just by talking to each other. Like if there's a need and we got to get something out faster, there's usually one person who can say like, here's the fastest way to do this in terms of using Excel better or we're using AI more for proofing emails. Like, did we communicate this the right way? Because how you communicate it makes a big difference. So we may draft an email, run it through our AI system and be like, if you start with the good news as opposed to leading with the bad, and sometimes AI can actually help you. You can read it. I mean, like AI doesn't always get it right, but they'll give you something back and it gives you feedback where then you can adjust it to say things in a more clear manner. I mean, that's, we're not using AI as much for, running algorithms or like figuring out, but it's just for really fact checking some of the stuff we're doing and saying, hey, if we explain it this way, does it make sense? Because AI will tell you if they understand you.
Yeah, I love that you're doing that, Matt. I was going to say, is there any I know soft skills is always an area of development for FP&A folks because I think the more experience you get, they kind of learn that on the job. But are there other things that you've been using sort of to build out the soft skills? Sounds like with the emails, like just building out how it's sounding is great, but with other.
Look, so we have and some of it is we have some fancy databases and it's like you can go in and you could run. But I think what we find that when we go to the big data and really querying that data, it's really hard to thin slice it and be like, okay, where did this come from? So we end up back in Excel, right? So we have this big data, but you run into the when you really want to know the why it happened, you run into the garbage in, garbage out, where it's directionally correct, but it's really hard to get to the root cause with these more powerful tools like maybe we're just not great at it, but when you get into the Power BI and then some of the other things that go through, they run fancy reports and they make it look good. But if you really want to drill in, we end up just dumping the data into Excel and still analyzing it. So maybe that's not the right answer, but that's kind of where we're stuck.
We're stuck in the same spot too. I think everyone in FP&A is stuck in. We all go back to Excel. I mean, that's a trusted tool.
Well, it's like we can actually get down to the individual transactions that you can find the outliers that might be the problem. So the higher level tools are great for the macro trends, but when you want to actually drill down into it, we still end up in Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find us doing the same. So we will we actually have a data team that supports like the our all of our data warehouse, which is in Snowflake. So they'll set up the queries for different reports. But then what we do is we'll go into the report, we'll download the raw data into like an Excel spreadsheet or a G sheet, and then like look at it from there and manipulate it the way we want it. So that's what always ends up happening. And even though the reports are just like more of a management thing for them to have a view, but we like always go back to the raw data.
Yeah, because they always want you to drill down, and you can't like until we like and I'm sure it's coming, but until you can get that like click and see the stuff behind it, and do that in a way where you can also cross-reference it to something else. Because sometimes you can drill down, but then you got to cross-reference, so you end up when you cross-reference, you need to put it into Excel because it's like we just haven't figured out how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we've been talking quite a bit about how to train and develop FP&A teams. I'd love to know from you, Matt, and also feel free to chime in, Andy, on what do you feel is the most effective way to measure any training and development programs that you have for your teams, and are you using any metrics to do that?
Ours is more like a net promoter score. So we know if your business leaders trust you and accept your recommendations, then that's like when we ask them, when we do our annual strategic plans, we'll be asking our leaders, who's on your core team? When you have a problem, who do you go to? And if they don't put down their FP&A person, well, then you're not very effective, right? So, that's like, it's like a soft measurement, but if you're like in that inner circle, like, okay, when I got to analyze something, you're their go-to person. That's the biggest. We don't, and like, look, it's like, I see us as like a cut sport. So you wouldn't make the team if you didn't have certain skills in the first place. And, so it's like, look, if you're being effective, that's how you get yourself on the team. And we are a high level team. So maybe if you're not a fit for our team, you might be more like an accounting person where there might still be a role for you. But you kind of have to have that analytical mind and have those soft skills. Because if the business doesn't go to you, it doesn't do you any good to be smart. So it's really kind of more like a net promoter score. If your person is advocating for you and taking your recommendations and like, look, that means they're actually using what you're telling them to get results too. Like we've had cases where people are really good at advocating for the business, but the business doesn't actually perform. Well, that's not like, we need to get the best of both worlds where you're making sound recommendations that are being accepted.
It's funny because we don't have a hard development or a measurement for FP&A here where I am or where I've been. But actually, Matt, you bring up a good point because I guess a good example is to seeing when our head of HR goes directly to the analyst, not to me first for any help with budgets, that kind of stuff. And then when I see them being called in for those without me, then I know that they're doing their job and they're doing it correctly, or they're a trusted source. Because I always feel that with FP&A, it's there has to be some sort of level of trust with the person. And that's the problem with even with FP&A numbers. If they're wrong coming out of FP&A, you may once or twice be okay. After the third time, no one really trusts what you're putting out there. So when I see that, that's a good way of actually looking at it, is that from a standpoint with my team, that when these heads of departments, businesses, divisions are going right to the source or to the person, skipping through me, and I know that there's a level of trust and that competency with my team. So.
Yeah, I think you both raised the business partnering and whether the business partners trust your team and your analysts is a good way of gauging whether the training and development and the relationship is working. I've also found that just giving them a chance maybe to present to senior management, maybe if they're not doing that, is a good way to test whether some of the softer skills are working well. I mean, it's not like a firm metrics way of doing it, but I've found that just giving them the opportunity to have more visibility with some of the senior management and maybe giving them bits and pieces to present, even if they're not leading an entire presentation, can be a good gauge for me whether they're learning some of those softer skills and how well can they do with like addressing the questions that are coming up, like how do they handle themselves in that pressure situation, how well prepared are they. I always find that interesting to see, and then we always, it's a way for me to also then go back and know that okay, there's maybe some development still for this particular person to do in particular areas, maybe in answering the questions, or maybe the way they present, or just the pointers that they're raising. I think those have been helpful. I mean, one of the other metrics that we look at, which maybe is not necessarily a training and development metric, but we track our forecast accuracy pretty closely, which I think for me is just like, okay, how do they have their pulse on the business? And we do forecast accuracy for a number of different areas.
When you do the accuracy, because we looked at this, to me, it's not so much important that they get it right, that they understand if it's not right, why. Like, because if they made good assumptions and just things change and they understand it, so it's, I think some people want to evaluate the accuracy, but it's more like, what I found is it's more like, what assumptions did you put in here, and were they good assumptions?
Yeah. I think being able to dig down deeper as to why, if it wasn't, like, we try to like hit it within a certain range, and that's our metric. But like when we don't, I think exactly to your point, Matt, it's like, are you able to explain why, and like what changed in the business where that was different from what we assumed? And are you able to explain that is also a very key way of knowing, how well they're doing their job, and like the areas of development. Yeah.
I think the other thing I'd like to say is I've also been on the side where if there's someone calling you complaining about your person all the time, regardless of the quality of their work, like you don't want to be fielding complaints. So it's like, when people aren't happy with your person, it's like, it doesn't matter how much you like them. If other people don't like them, it might be, well, at least it's time for critical feedback.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like, even if they're good at like those hard skills, if they're not effective at supporting their business partners, you don't want to be involved. I've definitely had situations where I've had to be involved in like all of their meetings because maybe they're just not good at like articulating what they're doing and whatnot, and people are complaining about it. I've had that situation too, but you bring up a really good point. That's definitely an area of development then for them. I'll segue into our next question. What do you both feel that, how can you address any resistance to change from employees and ensure that they're embracing the learning initiatives? When you do introduce them, how have you found, what have you found is effective in those cases? Maybe Andy, you can share your thoughts on the question.
Sure. I think it's kind of like kids. Sometimes you just need to let them speak, and you just need to sit and listen. And that's kind of what I've always done. Is we've had a lot of changes business-wise and tools, and so just kind of hearing them hear what they're saying, validate what they're saying, just to make sure that they know that you're going. But then try to redirect them. Even for me, some of the changes have been frustrating too, but that's just how it is. But I mean, have them involved in it, show empathy, continually support them in it, understanding that, these changes are here. Eventually it's going to help us. It's eventually going to improve our life, but let's work through it and figure out how we can make it work. But then mainly just be a listener. And I've read more and more about leaders need to be listen more and talk less. So.
Yeah, Matt, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I would agree. I also find out it's like, look, I think whenever I'm trying to change something, first time I tell them, nothing happens. Second time it happens, okay. It takes at least 3 times, and sometimes more than that. And then it's also, the more that I say it, like, look, sometimes I want to change something and I try it once and it's like, well, that wasn't really the right thing. It's more, the more you get to explain why you're doing what you're doing, and then also explaining how it benefits them. Like, I've had times where like I've asked somebody to do something, and here's the response back: well, I'll do it because you're my boss and you told me to do it and I respect you. And like, look, like, that is important to me that you respect me, but I'm not telling you to do it for me. I'm telling you to do it for you, to make you more effective. And if they don't understand that, then it's like, so I think explaining how everybody benefits from the change, and sometimes like the changes, we have to necessarily understand it all at first, but it's like, let's get buy-in for what we're doing, and then also be open to feedback, right? Because sometimes the people up top might have an idea. In practice, it doesn't really work. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like it's 80% there, but you got to tweak it 20%. And that's the feedback that people have in the field. So I think we have to over communicate what we're trying to change, but we also have to be open to feedback from them. Because if we meet in the middle and we understand the self-interest of like, here's how we all benefit. And it's like, look, if you end up, like, here's what we all know. If you're doing the same thing you were last year, you're probably becoming obsolete. So if you're not changing, how do we change in a way where it's good for all of us?
Yeah, and there was an audience question that I think goes hand in hand in what we're talking about, so I'll ask it now. The question was, what challenges do organizations face when implementing reskilling programs, and how can they be overcome? I've also found you both had some good points around how to get your own team to, how to get buy-in from your own teams. But I've also found with like implementing sometimes system changes, FP&A system changes, like my team's pretty good with like getting on board with it, but then we get overall adoption maybe is not happening in the organizations because people just don't want to use one other tool in addition to all the other tools they're using. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that particular question.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we get the push down, we say like sometimes nothing good happens from corporate. It all gets initiated in the field. Because when they push something out, they don't think through all the bugs. And we're the ones that live with the bugs and have to, we're like the people taking the bullets when somebody makes a decision and it doesn't work, right? So we're sitting there, and I think like then being able to kind of play both sides of like, look, here's why the organization has to evolve. Here's why we have to go digital. Here's why we have to invest in technology, or our competitors are going to pass us by. But it doesn't always work when you try to do some of these things. So it's like, how do we work? How do we basically make things work that sometimes don't work as designed, but they have to evolve? And that's where I think listening to everybody's opinion and being open, and then, but then reining them in and like, look, we got to get all the oars going. Like, you can't go wherever you want. Like, we have to do it within a controlled framework. And I think that has to do with having, we have weekly team meetings, and we don't try to make them over. But I think keeping the communication going so everybody respects everybody, that's the key to any kind of change, and then having a shared mission.
I would agree. We're in the same boat. We're having something pushed down from corporate on us, and we're struggling with it, but we're working through it and figuring out ways that we can use it. There are issues with it, but I think that is just trying to, and then it goes back to listening to them, to my team, but then also being their advocate back to our parent company about what issues we're seeing and what we do need, and that's where I'm working with my leadership team to kind of fight that back up to see that we can get it to, so it works as we were, how it's intended to work, not how we are working around to make it work. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the other questions from the audience was, which also kind of ties into that, was around the technology and how can technology be leveraged to enhance skills and initiatives and reskilling initiatives for FP&A professionals. Do you both have thoughts on that? I think we spoke about it a little bit before, but I'd love to hear more.
Well, I think it's a challenge that I have is like, look, if you have somebody who understands the industry really well and has been doing it a long time and is comfortable with how do you teach that old dog new tricks, right? And how do you make them want to? Because look, if they have the legacy knowledge and they have the trust, like getting them to use the latest, you can get somebody really smart who can use the latest tool, but if they don't have that legacy knowledge, they're not there. And so it's a challenge, right, to get people to understand and then also be realistic, right? Because it's like, I think what you have to do is find everybody's individual skill sets and set them up to leverage their skills to the max, and then find out what they're interested in and encourage them to continue learning. Because it's hard to it'd be great if everybody was a physicist or something, but we all have our own skill sets, and we also have not everybody can make $300,000 a year, right? So it's like there's, you have budgets where it's like sometimes you've got like skills for what the level you're willing to pay too. So, it's a balance.
I do think with the technology question, and feel free to share as well. I was just going to say we need to be thoughtful about like whether the technology is going to propel their work or not, right? Because you don't want to like implement something where it's like actually not helping them, or it's not adopted, or there's more resistance. Like it's got to help them to do their work faster. It's got to supplement their work, automate things maybe that they're doing manually. So that's where I found that the benefit comes in implementing technology and not just doing technology for the sake of technology, right? And then Andy, if you have
No, I agree, and I think also for me sometimes it's saying, hey, this new technology or new tool will help will help your career in the long run, especially for a more junior or younger analyst. I mean, this is where the FP&A is going. So learning that is might be important for your career down the road. I mean, and so kind of encouraging them on that side to see where it benefits them in the long run. So
yeah. Okay, yeah, since we have a few minutes left, I'd like to pivot to some of the other questions that we have from the audience. I thought this one was really interesting, is that what advice would you give to your FP&A staff to ensure they can establish good relationships and balance the politics?
It goes back to Matt's comment about being a politician in FP&A. I mean, I think it's kind of like being a parent. You need to be strong, but also be able to listen to them and what they want. So sometimes a good example is we're going through the overhead forecasting right now, and sort of everyone wants to add heads. We're not in the mode to add heads right now. So, but listen to their concerns and then kind of say, okay, this is where I think our CEO or our CFO is going to push back on you on it, and just give them that input and just kind of. But you're still being a partner, but you're also kind of still being firm on them that this is what I see maybe your pitfalls with what you're asking for, and that's kind of how I would manage good relationship along with the politics and with the business or department head.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think with us, it's like, especially with that question, we're trying to pro forma stuff as much as we can and teach people, okay, when you want to add a head, here's how you build your business plan. And look, you got to show that you're going to get certain, it's not about a dollar for a dollar or trade. It's more like, if I'm going to make an investment, how do I get a return on that investment? And what has to happen? And realize you might be looking at over 3 years, because everybody likes to what they like to do is scope it. So it makes it look like their case is really strong, and they eliminate all the information that doesn't support their case. And it's like, well, you kind of have to include all of it. You can't just be like, I'm only going to count the sunny days. I'm not going to count the rainy days. And you got to show them that you got to build it all in. And if you can't clear a certain threshold, well, that's why you're getting shut down. It's not that they don't like you. It's that
right.
The case isn't strong enough.
Yeah. I mean, just to add to what we both were saying, I think just having the informal relationships though with your business partners also really helps. Like, you kind of don't want to always just only be talking to them when there's a need, or like you're delivering some kind of bad news with them, good news to them that you're cutting budget. I think just having those relationships with them where you're having constant conversation, you're building like a trusted relationship with your business partners, I think goes a long way. It helps at the times when things are difficult and you're having to navigate through a difficult situation, because you've already built that trust and relationship with them. I think we only have 1 minute left, so I know we had lots of questions which we couldn't get to, but thank you Andrew, and thank you Matt. Any final thoughts that you all would like to share before we close off?
No, I think feel free to reach out to any of us individually if there's specific questions you have, and it was an honor to be here.
I agree. Thank you, and reach out, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and it was thank you for the very insightful discussion to both Andrew and Matt. Please feel free to reach out, since we didn't get to all of your questions individually. Reach out on LinkedIn, and with that, I'll hand back over to Brittany.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for such an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else who joined us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin shortly at 12:30 Eastern, which will be a thought leadership titled Finance Needs AI, but AI Needs Finance More. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all again.
Thank you.